everybody, it's Michael Posnick, and I have my special guest returning this week, Patty Campbell from Powerhouse Realty. And today's subject on our shiny new podcast is picking a real estate agent. And I bring this up this week because we've actually had to do that with the last few months because Patty's daughter has been looking for a house. And would you say our net result wasn't that great?
Yes, I would agree.
So our net result wasn't that great. We'll get into it more in this podcast, but I think picking a real estate agent is vitally important when you're looking for real estate anywhere because it is going to make your purchasing journey, either very, very smooth, rewarding, and potentially profitable when you go to buy or sell, than picking an agent that has no experience, no negotiating ability, and hasn't done any transactions. Welcome to the podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to it, and we'll actually make a third episode. If we don't get any demand, we won't make any more. It sounds like a threat, but it's not, right? Supply and demand. And of course, if you have any questions about Prince Edward Island or PEI real estate, email them to us and we'll put that on the show. So picking a real estate agent, in my opinion, probably the biggest concern that I have right now is as markets get better right across North America, whether it's Prince Edward Island, Toronto, New York, Los Angeles, or wherever, your amount of real estate agents, those people that have licenses, goes up astronomically. And in PEI, prior to 2016, we had about 100 and change real estate agents, 120, 130, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
And now we have close to 500. The challenge being a lot of those new real estate agents aren't doing real estate full-time. They're not spending the time getting the education that they need. They're not taking negotiating courses. So even though some of them can claim to be, like many agents, been in business for a year or two or 5 or 10 or 15 years, they may have not done any transactions. In order to be in real estate or even have a brokerage in PEI, you don't even have to have a single transaction. You can get your real estate agent license on a Monday and Tuesday open up a brokerage. There's no prerequisite. There was a rumor that you required 2 years of experience or holding an active license, but that has been proven to be nothing more than a myth or a want. But
suggestion.
Or a suggestion. So when you pick somebody, longevity is not indication of experience. Experience is important because of anything. I mean, if you're hiring a brain surgeon, do you want the guy fresh out of medical school or the guy's done 1,000 brain surgeries? Patty, if you're looking for a real estate agent for your daughter, what are we going to be looking for this time?
Well, First, I'd like to make sure they have market knowledge of the area that, in this instance, situation my daughter is actually looking in, so that I know they understand property values and hopefully properly advise my daughter whether she is paying more than she should be, is, I think, one of the most important points at this juncture with her. I would trust as a buyer's agent that they would provide that information and guidance to her.
I think the key thing you said there, unless I read you wrong, is in this particular case, these agents lived hours worth of driving away from the property that was offered on. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, they did.
Right. So how can you have a knowledge? Like one of the things about the realtor code, a realtor is someone that is part of the Canadian Real Estate Association, abides by their ethics codes. And one of those ethic codes are you aren't supposed to be operating in markets that you don't know anything about. And in this case, that's what they are doing. But whose fault is it at the end of the day? It's kind of yours, isn't it? And the daughter's, because you guys picked an agent that knew nothing about the market.
Yes. However, they presented and said that they did. They had listings in the area, which again, as a consumer going through this experience, and which is golden in my opinion, because I get to feel what, a consumer who has no knowledge would go through and how they would make their decisions and choices. I seen a couple listings in the area. I made the false assumption that that implied market knowledge in that area.
No, absolutely. And the thing about Nova Scotia or Ontario, you just use those two examples, or New Brunswick, Newfoundland, is they're big provinces. And to have one agent that's 13 hours away, represent a property that they know nothing about, even though, how do I put this? You want someone local. And in PEI, it's a small enough province to have knowledge of the entire island if that agent, like you and I, having done this for almost 40 years, it's 39 years right now. Collectively, to know the island. But to expect an agent to know all of Nova Scotia or all of Ontario would be practically impossible because they're massive provinces. And even in PEI, based on my knowledge, most agents aren't going to know the whole island because a lot of them don't want to travel that far and put those miles on the car or invest the time.
Yeah. And again, it's easy for someone to say they work in just using PEI because that's where we're drawing our experience from, to say that they know the island tip to tips market. The reason I think we can make that claim is because each of us have lived in Summerside. You much longer than I did. I lived in Summerside for about 5 years and predominantly worked Summerside and the west of Western PEI's market. And then in 2015, I moved to Charlottetown and ended up, and it did take about the first year of, my time in Charlottetown to start to learn, understand the little pocket communities, neighborhoods, understand the market, understand, the temperature of the market, where are the hot spots here, and Eastern PEI. And I know you've done the same. So that's what gives us a unique, perspective. And we can make the claim that we do work the island tip to tip, but many have not had that same journey.
Right. Certainly not in the bigger provinces. So make sure the agent you're hiring has some knowledge of the market. In this particular case, some of the houses we look at were in neighborhoods that were questionable. We wouldn't know any difference. It's the first time I had ever been to that town, and same with Patty.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure they know the actual area you're looking at. If you're looking for a house in Summerside, ask them if they lived in Summerside. Ask them how many properties they've sold or they've listed there. It's important. Just because someone's had their license for 10 years doesn't mean they haven't sold. They've sold 2 properties. That doesn't add up to experience because you find out they're working full-time somewhere else. So number 2, what would you say number 2 would be?
Well, just on that is how many transactions, because that's kind of where you just led. So if the number of transactions is number 2, many will say they've been in the business for, so say myself, I can say as of January, I have been selling full-time real estate on Prince Edward Island. But what does that equate to transactions? It sounds good. It sounds like, 14 years. Well, she knows her stuff. But what if I was, and like you had said with the first example, what if I was doing this part-time? What if I'm not very good? What if
What if you move from another area? You got 20 years experience, but 19 and a half of it are in Toronto.
Yeah, well, for sure. And that's why I say, yes, it doesn't matter how long you've been selling real estate as a whole. How long have you been selling real estate in the area that you are claiming to be a realtor and have market knowledge?
Or where you're buying in.
Correct. So for me, like I was saying, I was 14 years here, but that still doesn't indicate expertise. Do you want, and I use, and anyone that's, clients of mine will know they've heard this example from me before. There's many, general practitioners, they serve their purpose 100%, but you want to go to your general practitioner or your, medical doctor for open heart surgery. You would want a specialist. You would want a cardiologist to, oversee the procedure. So I strive, I am not saying I am because I continue to educate on a daily basis, but I strive to be that specialist in my industry, as I know you do as well, Michael, so that I can properly inform, educate, protect, and serve my clients that choose to work with me. I have also, and this is where, along with that 14 years, how many transactions? I don't know what your number is, Michael, but I know I've done over 500 transactions, and I haven't added this year's total in, but I know confidently I can say over 500 transactions I put together. And I'm going to ask you, why would that be important to a consumer?
It's important, just like the brain surgeon analogy, in that if you do run into a complication, you're not sitting there looking for textbooks or Googling it.
Absolutely.
Right? So some of the questions for a new agent: where do you live? If they live 4.5 hours away, they're probably not going to go out of their way to show a house on 4 minutes notice, because they can't get there anyway without a jet ski or something. I don't know, rocket ship. The other question I would have, most importantly, are you doing this full time? Or are you working for the federal government, or you got another business cooking omelets?
For Cavendish Farms.
Well, we got one
delivering pizza.
One broker's starting a restaurant, so he's learning how to cook omelets and the same time running a brokerage. I want someone that's focused on me 100%, someone that's full-time. If they're not full-time, they better have someone on their team that's going to be taking care of me, because I'm very needy.
You are high demand.
So transactions, experience, locality, where they live, just for the sake of convenience. They're going to be much more ready to show a house that's 2 minutes away than 4.5 hours away. Continuing education: to become a real estate agent, you require typically 3 educational credits, plus or minus, depending what province or state you're in. And some of those can be done on a Zoom call, which, you fire up the webinar, you put it in the background, go cook lunch, and come back, and you have your credit.
Yeah.
That's what you do, right?
Education's one. I do not do that.
So continuing your education, if you got an agent that's flying all over the country, maybe they're members of different organizations that advocate higher education, or maybe they're taking negotiating classes. Negotiating is a huge, huge part of real estate, particularly if I'm representing you as a buyer. I will do the best I can to get you the best deal, providing, we're working in that agency and that fiduciary responsibility, buyer's contract.
Yeah.
Whatever.
What extra credentials do they have?
Do they have any credentials in
designations? Yep.
Right, in negotiating? And if someone's done thousands of transactions, then they hopefully can be a better negotiator than someone that does this on part-time and's done
Or who's only done, yeah.
Because they're going to get kicked around like a football. In 2016, there's 130 agents. Out of those 130, there might have been 20, 25 that were doing 80% of the business.
Yeah, 2016, I'd say there was about 200 of us in the business at that time. And same as the 80-20 rule, there was, 20% of us doing 80% of the work. So which rule still applies today. But unfortunately, our market's quite saturated with realtors, because they felt in 2021, this became a business, an industry of, a license to print money. And unfortunately, I think the standard of service and care has been lowered. And, I want to make sure, and which is why I agree to go on these with you, Michael, is I want to make sure that standard level of care is as high as we can, provide for our clients, by making sure our clients know which questions to ask, for their representative, whether they're looking for a listing agent or a buyer's agent. Make sure the agent is educated, working in the, business full-time preferably, or has somebody that's going to be primarily taking care of them, making sure that they, have not just only the time in the industry to proclaim, but that they have the transactions behind them to protect me, to foresee any issues or problems that might arise, so that I feel better protected as a client, and I feel safe and protected. And I mean, real estate is a roller coaster ride. My job, as I foresee it here as a realtor, is to lessen the bumps of the journey. It's to provide as best of a real estate experience as I can, trying to get, keep as much money in my client's pocket as possible, whether, they're buying or selling their properties. So that would be my guidance and input.
Yeah, and in closing, in a number of states and provinces, it's illegal to represent the buyer and seller, and I think that should be what's happening here in PEI. I know Patty doesn't, and I really don't want to represent the buyer and seller unless it's just everyone's in agreement as to what they're doing. It's a simple contract, a no-brainer, no negotiating. Because I can't advocate, and Patty can't advocate for a purchaser trying to get them the best deal when you're advocating for a vendor and trying to get them more money.
Perfect. Another
Better
podcast agency. So let's not go off on a rabbit trail here.
Okay, no rabbit trail. We'll cover that in a future podcast if there is one. And that will be determinant as to how many people subscribe and rate the podcast 6 stars or higher. I think it goes from 1 to 5, so 6 is even better. And comment if you can. Have a great day. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michael.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.